Hello, everybody. I hope you're well. I am 2 minutes late, but I'm here. I'm just going to give Melissa a chance to join and then we'll get started. Our topic for today is the intersection of religion and mental health and counseling. So welcome. There she is. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Okay, I've accepted. So she should be here in a second. There she is. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Technology tried me, but it didn't fail. We're here.
My side as well.
How was your day?
It was hectic, but good, but just very, very busy. And
Okay.
your day?
Mine too, actually. I ran so fast, sped, whatever, broke all the rules getting home. I literally had a few minutes to get here, but I'm glad we're here and I'm excited to be having this conversation. Thank you so much for coming. You didn't send me your bio, but it's fine because I know who you are. So I'll just introduce you. So, welcome to everyone who's joined us. I am joined by Melissa Smith, soon to be Mrs. She'll let us know what her future surname is going to be. And Melissa is a registered counselor. She's very passionate about mental health. And we have had the pleasure and we were blessed to work together. And I think we have the same vision and mission, which is to change the world, and make a difference. And I think we both enjoy having these conversations where we create platforms where we can speak about not only mental health, but also I think Christianity is also as important to you as it is to me. And I thought, as a mental health advocate and someone who truly believes in God, it's important for us to bring in a conversation where we speak about both our Christian faith, but also our mental health. So, welcome, Melissa.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be in this space and to have this conversation with you.
Yeah. So, please tell us about yourself and maybe why you chose to work in the space that you work in now.
Okay, perfect. So, as you know, my name is Melissa, and I actually didn't choose, psychology wasn't a first choice for me. It was actually law that was my first choice, not knowing what psychology was or anything. And then, fun fact, my mom actually chose the career path for me. And
Oh,
I think
wow.
she's the one who chose it. And she was like, I think this would suit you because I was, but all over, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I know that I wanted to help people, but I didn't know in which capacity that was.
Mm.
And she actually chose this path for me, or suggested it to me. And after my first year, I completely fell in love with the content, with the way, the mind works and how brain and behavior works.
Mm.
And I then definitely wanted to continue with the course. So so then I continued in this path, and as time progressed, I also became very passionate. Sorry, my light. I'm just gonna put it off. And I just became very passionate with mental health
Yes.
and making it accessible to people. I grew up in Mitchell's Plain on the Cape Flats and in Cape Town, and just seeing what was happening in Cape Town was really eye-opening to me, and definitely fueled my passion for wanting to make a difference as well.
Okay, so what work do you do? What is a registered counselor? Because I think before I worked at Panda, I just knew that a mental health professional is a psychologist. Then I learned that there were so many other people that worked in this space, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. So, for someone who doesn't know what a registered counselor is, would you like to share and maybe also give us a difference between that and the psychologist that we all know of?
Definitely. So with regards to a registered counselor, it is under the bracket of psychology. So there's a broad umbrella of like psychology, according to the Health Professions Council of South Africa, which is the HPCSA, the body that we are registered with. And so under the umbrella of psychology, there's psychologists, there's registered counselors, psychometrists. And so with a registered counselor, you will have to complete a 3-year bachelor's degree in psychology, and then thereafter you do a BPsych honors equivalent, and then you write your board exam. And what that allows you to do, it allows you to counsel people. With example, you can counsel people that have challenges with anxiety, with mental health disorders, as long as the mental health disorders are already diagnosed. But you can deal with trauma, you can deal with, like I said, anxiety, you can do couples therapy, individual counseling. So there's a broad spectrum that you can deal with. The difference between the psychologist and the registered counselor is that we also, as a registered counselor, we get trained to know the DSM, which is the diagnostic criteria that you would diagnose a mental health disorder with. So we get trained in that, and part of our exam is also that, but the difference is we cannot diagnose. So a psychologist, they get specific training where they're able to diagnose when you do your master's, then you're able to diagnose different mental health disorders. And so both of our areas also cannot prescribe medication. That's just for a psychiatrist. But when it comes to the counseling part, the registered counselor can work in the space of counseling, but cannot diagnose, whereas the psychologist can diagnose. So that's one of the major differences, besides our training, obviously. As you progress into masters, it's a bit more in depth, and it's got to do with your childhood traumas as well, and your clinical psychopathology, which is the mental health disorders.
And also, I think the cost as well. I've noticed
Yes,
that psychologists
that's
are
the
more
other thing.
expensive.
Yes,
How would I know if I need to see a psychologist or if I need to see a registered counselor without knowing that I might need to be diagnosed, because a lot of the time we have no idea.
So when you go to say for example, you feel that your life has been disrupted by, maybe a life event that happened, or you're going through, some trauma in your life. So you would automatically then reach out. You would reach out to perhaps a registered counselor or a counselor. That counselor's responsibility is where they're supposed to refer you to a psychologist. So once the counselor gets the referral and they see that this is out of the scope of practice, only then would we be able then to refer. So if you say on your intake form that we get, and you say that you have particular symptoms, and we can evaluate those symptoms, and we need to make an ethical referral to a practitioner that can actually assist you within that. If your symptoms fall within our scope of practice, then we can assist you with that.
Oh, okay, cool. But the sad thing is I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know that I could get
Yes,
someone
the
who's
average
super.
person wouldn't know
Yeah,
if they don't have a background of psychology, for example.
that's so sad. How do we make people know that? Like, what do we need to do? Because I realized that we don't all need to see psychologists. And because they're so expensive, you pay so much and you can't even afford to maintain the relationship. But because people have no idea, they go once and then you stop going because you went and you paid so much money. I feel like you could have gone to see a counselor for more sessions with one session that you're seeing a psychologist. But then you go once and you feel like, that one time I went didn't help, because obviously the first session is not going to make a difference, really. It's just going to probably make you feel worse. But what can we do to help people understand and know that there is this option?
It's definitely like spreading the awareness, because like I said, people are uninformed, and you also mentioned it, people are really uninformed about when to see which professional. And I see on social media platforms, I do see more practitioners putting it out there, when to see a counselor, when to see a psychologist, when to see a psychiatrist, and so I think it's just important for us also to be aware of that. But when your life is being disrupted from your day-to-day activities, and you cannot function or cope as per normal, then do reach out. I would say reach out to a counselor first. And the reason why I say that is because registered counselors is almost like your paramedics.
Okay.
In the field of psychology, that's how I see us. We are first responders. We are like paramedics, and once we got what we, what you're dealing with, we are able
Mm.
then to make a proper referral. So if you've ever watched like, Chicago Fire or Grey's Anatomy or any medical show, you'll see that the paramedics are the first responders. They get onto the scene
Yeah.
and they can actually help the person in that capacity if need be. And if the person needs to be rushed to a hospital to go and see a specialist, for example, because there's
Mm.
something wrong with their heart or they need, some other medical procedure, then they would take the person. But the handover is so important. And that is why a paramedic is also trained in anatomy and is also trained with medical background, because when they do the handover to the doctor, to the specialist, they're able to do a proper handover. And ultimately, that also plays a part in saving that person's life. If you look at that medically, now the same thing applies to us in the field of psychology.
Okay, this is also not on script, but I just thought of a question now. I don't know how many times I've seen doctors and I felt like they weren't really aware or interested in the whole mental health situation, where it felt like, excuse me, it felt like a doctor had the opportunity to find out if I'm doing okay mentally, if maybe what's affecting me physically could be linked to how I'm feeling emotionally and mentally, but it felt like that wasn't the case. Do you think I was imagining things, or do you think we still have a long way to go in that sense, where I
We
might be
do.
seeing, yeah, because a doctor also, sometimes someone might not know that they need to see a registered counselor, but I could see a doctor who should be able to refer me to a counselor or psychologist, right?
Yes, definitely. I had a case like that a few years back with a young woman that experienced anxiety or PTSD
Yeah.
after she had an attack at work, and she experienced PTSD, and she was placed on medication by the psychiatrist, and then the psychiatrist referred her to me for further counseling. And so while she was on medication, we then started the process of counseling, and slowly but surely she weaned herself off the medication, but she continued with the counseling. So I think it's also just this notion of our professionals want to work in silos. We don't
Mm.
want to work in a multidisciplinary team. We don't understand that we all have a part to play, when it comes to helping somebody. So it's more an holistic approach than anything else. And so I feel like sometimes medical doctors take them out of the equation, and they're like, I don't have a part to play in this. But they actually do, even if it is a small part, you do, because like you mentioned, what you've mentioned about how sometimes your physical body, your mental health affects your physical body, and that is called psychosomatic. When you are just pushing aside or you're pushing down your emotions or what you are feeling, and it's starting to affect your physical body because you're not getting the help that you need. So you're not getting that emotions out of you. You're not processing it, and so it starts affecting you physically.
Mm. Okay. I thought maybe I had some, I don't know, maybe I was grumpy
No.
that day. But I went to see a doctor once and I was like, I think I'm not okay. I was like, here's an injection, go home, go to work tomorrow. And I was like, I hate doctors.
Oh my word! Now imagine how many people are feeling like that.
Exactly. And I think that was obviously before I worked in this space now, and I think now I'm more aware. So I think now I would be able to have a conversation with the doctor and tell them how I'm feeling and why I think this is the case and if they can assist me. But a lot of people have no idea. So I think hopefully this reaches some medical professionals and doctors out there. And hopefully I've also met a few doctors though who are getting into the space where they're now focusing on the holistic well-being. So I think we're getting there
Yes,
slowly but surely.
definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the topic at hand, which is Christianity and mental health and the link between the two. I think before we talk about church counseling, maybe would you share with us how your experience is as a registered counselor who is also a Christian who also can offer church counseling? How do you separate the two? And also maybe
Okay.
sharing, sorry, and maybe just share
No,
the
no, no.
difference between the two as well.
Okay, perfect. I love this topic. I just want to say that because I think it's such a important conversation to have. And so, yes, I am a Christian. I'm a born again Christian, not just embracing my religion, but also embrace the faith of Christianity. And I often find that there is a bit of an overlap with the counseling sometimes. So being a Christian and a registered counselor, so in my scope of practice or under the jurisdiction of the HPCSA, I'm not allowed in my sessions to bring my religion or my point of view into the session. So often when I do get asked for counseling, it's more from a psychological point of view where people reach out for counseling and not necessarily for Christian counseling unless it's really specific. So say for instance, if I am doing counseling and it's not asked for Christian based, then I follow what the route that I was trained to do in psychological counseling. Like I was trained to do certain methods, that use certain modalities, and so I use that. I've had oftentimes also where clients would ask um, to incorporate both. So maybe a client is a Christian and then they maybe saw in my profile that I'm also do Christian counseling, and then they would ask, can we use both methods? Like, can we use the word of God and we can use like your background in psychology as well, and can we use that as we journey along? So there's also been that instance where I was able then to use the word of God and the methods, within Christianity and the faith for those who believe in, the gospel of Jesus Christ, use that, and then also use my background in psychology and merge that together and develop a particular plan for that client that wants that counseling. And then I do my experience with regards to counseling in churches. So I haven't really like seen counseling, being done from the outside in and at the churches that I've been. I've seen ministry leaders take on the role of counseling, but I haven't seen professional counselors. And when I say professional, for us that's registered with a particular board, come into the church space and provide the counseling. It's always just from a pastoral level, and the pastors particularly, they do like Christian counseling, or they're supposed to do like either a module or there's like a course on Christian counseling that they do that caters specifically to Christians as well.
Okay, so is that done in Bible school then?
That's done in Bible school, but it's you can either, and some do a course, like a separate course from Bible school, because in theology, when you study theology, there is like an element of psychology. And so some of them, when they want to specialize in counseling, they do like a separate course in Christian counseling, but it's plainly like biblically based.
Okay, cool. Is there a difference between counseling and therapy?
Well, there seems to be a lot of conversation about it. Some people believe that it's just, semantics, and other people believe that, with counseling, it's more shorter term,
Okay.
and with therapy, it's more longer term. So, for example, with counseling, it's anything from like um, 4 sessions to 13 sessions. And then for therapy, you can see a therapist for like years and years and years and years, depending on obviously what you are dealing with. And then it's more in depth with going back to like your childhood and dealing with childhood trauma now that you're an adult, and kind of journeying from that phase where you got stuck in that trauma and kind of that healing journey from there to your present and how it affects you now, and then healing in your present.
So if I was your client and we had counseling and you felt like there's deeper things that I need to deal with, you would refer me to a therapist who would then have a longer relationship with me.
I would then refer to a psychologist, especially if there is, say for an example, perhaps there is, multiple traumas that has taken place. So obviously that's going to take a bit longer for us to deal with. And so I would then, because there might be a psychosis that developed because of the longer term trauma. So for example, there might be a personality disorder that developed, or there might have been something that happened in the past that triggered, something, and maybe in your previous generations, there was perhaps a mental health disorder, and so there's a predisposition for it, and whatever has happened to you might have triggered that. So then I would, if I see after like, the 10th session or so, I'm seeing that it's still continuing, then I would then refer you to a psychologist that I feel if you would benefit from that.
Okay, cool. Then back to the Christian counseling. What type of person would go for Christian counseling? Is it okay, I just lost a family member, and I'm like, okay, let me phone my pastor. I need support, or like how and what can I expect also from a Christian counselor?
So Christian counseling mostly would be, active Christians, those that really like embraced Christianity. And when I say embraced, it's like those that, says that they accepted Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. So they would most definitely go for Christian counseling if they, lost a loved one or they've gone through some trauma. When they do go to the church to reach out for counseling, the people that usually does the counseling at the churches is usually either the pastor, the pastor's wife, or like a ministry leader. And so sometimes they would do the counseling. It's very, very rare that you go to a church and you find that there's a licensed counselor at the church providing counseling or heading up, the counseling. And the reason why I say that is because you find pastors who's a male having counseling with females and with no consent. And when like no written consent. And also in churches, that's something that they don't have. Like they have a counseling center, and you can come and we can pray with you, because that's initially what happens in the counseling at times. There's a conversation, there's prayer, but there's no written consent for that particular session to take place. And only if you're trained in the field of psychology, only when you're trained to really, like as a professional, do you understand the importance of that consent.
I was actually going to ask, why is it important to get consent if I'm the one that came to you? Why should you get consent from me? Because I reached out in any case. Isn't that consent enough?
Well, it's consent in the sense that, okay, you reached out for the counseling, but if you take it into a professional sphere as well, if you reach out to me for counseling, I still need your written consent, because we are going to discuss things in that space. That is going to be personal, it's going to be private, and you need to understand that whatever I discuss with you stays here. Now, what happens sometimes in churches is that people don't have consent for this. And when we also have consent, we tell the client, whatever you're discussing with me, it's private, it's confidential. Now, where this comes into play sometimes in the church is that people will confide in that particular pastor, pastor's wife, or ministry leader, and then they would take that information and have a sermon about it. And not necessarily mentioning the person's name, but just talking about, this particular situation and whatever. And they tie it into their sermon, and that person feel like they can't trust the church, or they feel like they can't trust the people at church anymore. And it caused such like a blockage between that person even just continuing their journey, in church. And that's where the term comes from. And it's probably a separate conversation. But that's where the term comes from, where people also say, like, I got hurt at church, and you have this whole church hurt thing. It's for things like this that fosters that hurt between people, because they don't understand that when you enter into a therapeutic relationship or counseling relationship with somebody, consent is important, to explain that whatever they say, it's protected. But because people don't get the proper training, they can't protect what is being told, or they don't understand the emphasis of that protection of that confidential information.
I'm glad you mentioned training, because I was going to ask, what type of training should leaders in church have in order for them to be able to provide proper counseling to church members?
I definitely believe that there should be some sort of, for every ministry leader should do some basic course, in counseling. I think it's important to hold a space, because they spend a lot of time on spiritual training, like leadership trainings. You get, ministry trainings, which is amazing if you're involved in ministry. But there should be like part of that training of getting somebody into a leadership position. There should be like a basic training of counseling as well, because as soon as those people go through something like traumatic or a crisis, who do they run to? They run to you as the leader.
Mm,
And so at least some basic form of skills or tools you should have in order to hold the space for that person in that moment and not
mm,
minimize the feelings when they come to you and say, my spouse passed away or my mom passed away, and they respond with, don't worry, God has a plan for you. That's
mm,
minimizing somebody's feelings in that moment, even though God does have a plan, and God does work all things out for the good to those who love and is called according to his purpose. He does that, but the timing is not right to do that. And when you get trained in basic skills, you understand the importance of timing. And so that is why it's so important that they get some sort of basic training so that we don't minimize people's feelings and we're able to hold that space and then journey with that person spiritually, but also then refer the person for professional counseling if we see that they are still dealing with the grief and they're not knowing how to cope with it.
mm. That's so interesting because I know even outside of church counseling and church, counseling and being in a space where I'm seeking support from a leader, we do that on a personal level where someone comes to me and I'm like, Jeremiah 29 verse 11, for he knows the plans he has for you. They are to make you prosper. This too shall pass, and all these other things.
Yes.
And we say to each other, because sometimes you really don't know what to say. And it feels like if I give you the word, then that is enough. So I think it's a lesson for not just leaders and counselors, but for all of us. I think also the important thing that you mentioned is the timing. I can still say Jeremiah 29, but not
Yes.
in that moment, right? In that moment, I'm supposed to listen to the person and embrace their feelings and emotions. But I think because we don't know how to manage even our own emotions, when someone comes to us with theirs, it's like, what do I do with these emotions?
Definitely, because you can feel overwhelmed. You feel so overwhelmed by somebody's emotion, and that is normal. It's so
Mm,
normal. And someone like the people that is tuning in or that's going to listen to this live, it's
yeah.
normal to feel overwhelmed by people's emotions. It's a normal response. But how we
Mm,
navigate that space is so important for you and for that person, so that you don't take on that emotions and kind of, you know identify within that emotions and make it your own,
mm,
and you also don't push the person away as well, which is also important. So I think it's really just like I said, it's timing and training. And I
mm,
think it's more churches, more religious organizations, specifically because we're talking about Christianity, but if more churches can spend some time and equip their leaders holistically. It's not just about, oh, we want to bring mental health into the church. No, like
mm,
this is a pandemic that we're facing. We are losing people on a daily to suicide. We are losing people on a daily when it comes to their mental health. And so it's no longer oh, we need to think about it. It becomes a necessity
yeah.
that I believe, and this is what I advocate for personally on a personal level, aside from being like a registered counselor, just on a personal level, I believe that leaders should be trained holistically. And that's what I aim to do. I made that my mission 2024, that I am going to train and equip whatever church leader, because the people run to the church, because we have this thing that says the church is a hospital for the sick,
Yes.
right? But if we go in there and we don't have trained people to deal with the sick, then what's going to happen to that people? Spiritually, they're going to die.
Mm.
So it's
Yo,
important that we get trained and we get equipped.
that's true. I know you have a training manual that you've put together. Is that available for a specific type of people? Is it available for all? Is it for sale? And how do you manage the trainings that you provide for the different churches?
So I just launched the first one. I actually did it on Saturday, and it was really, really, amazing to be able to do the training. So what I've done was I've put together a training for ministry leaders specifically, just basic counseling skills for ministry leaders specifically, that touches on empathy, active listening, communication, and that just helps that ministry leader to know what to do in that space when somebody in the ministry comes to them and says, you know what, I've lost my husband, or I lost my mom, or, I was raped. And they don't know how to handle that information. Also, where to go. When do you refer to a social worker? when do you refer to a registered counselor, when do you refer
Mm,
to a psychologist. So that is also inclusive in there, but it's mostly tips and tools for the leader to be proactive in
mm,
that space and to understand that we are not the main character as spiritual leaders in that people's lives, but we play a part. We play a part. We cannot be the main character if somebody experienced a trauma.
mm,
It's not within our scope to be that main person, but we can still come alongside, and it's not also all or nothing.
mm,
We play a part in it where we come alongside the person and we can still journey with him. So that's what my training aimed to do. And I'm trusting God to, get it across wherever and just help leaders. I'm going to do another online class at the end of June or sometime in June. And I would like for church leaders from all over, to get involved and to get trained and to equip the leaders so that us as the body of Christ can really help our people to become holistic and whole.
mm. So do you charge for these trainings and this manual that you've created, and how do people get hold of it?
So it's a case by case. So I do the
Mm,
training for the leaders. And so I will see, like, if the church can afford to pay for it, or if the person can afford to pay for it, then we'll do it. My fee is $850, and that is for the training, and then it includes a certificate of attendance, and also includes resources as well afterwards.
mm, mm.
So that's what's packaged in the training. But I do like to take it case by case because I also want to make it accessible as well to people. So I don't want to say, okay, that's my fee and then just like cut it off there. But I take it on a case by case basis, and I like the goal, the mission for me is just to make it accessible. And they can contact me via my social media platform or my email address. If you go onto Instagram, you do see my email address there as well. I'm also available on Facebook, and you can just email me and we can set up like a little consult, and then we can kind of take it from.
Okay, cool. I'll also add your email address on the caption when I save the live. So, what can I expect from a leader who is going to give me Christian counseling when I reach out to them and I say, this is what I'm going through? Or rather, let's not say what can I expect, but what should I expect? Like, what are they supposed to be providing me?
So they are supposed to provide, or what you can expect when you go to a church to ask for counseling is you're going to have somebody that's going to listen to you. You might have somebody that's going to share a testimony of either a similar experience. And when I say testimony, I mean like it's somebody that's going to share what they have gone through, and they're
Mm,
going to try and encourage you with what they have gone through to encourage you to get through this particular, let's call it a storm that you are
mm,
going through. So they are going to encourage you, with their testimony to kind of get through the storm. And they are
yeah.
also going to give you biblical like scriptures, and they're going to encourage you with the Bible.
Mm,
And there's also going to be prayer there. Now, if there is a counselor on staff at that particular church that maybe has a background in psychology, they might take a different route, and you might come to a couple of sessions, where they will sit with you and they will listen to you. They'll give you a space where you can actually go through your emotions. But it definitely will either start or end with prayer, and there will be biblical principles that will be intertwined in there. And they might journey with you, or they might suggest to you to go to speak to brother so and so or sister so and so to kind of journey alongside you as you go through this particular storm.
Okay, I was studying a coaching course earlier this year, and there was a part where it spoke about how we as coaches should not project our experiences to our clients. Do you think the sharing a testimony is an element of projecting your experiences because now you're making it about yourself as well?
I think definitely it could be. Again, it comes to timing and also how you do it. So I have done it in spiritual counseling in the sense of where I'll ask the person,
Mm,
can I just share with you? I just want to share something with you that I think can help you. And then I'll share, particularly because I had a brother that was addicted to drugs for many, many years, and my father was also addicted to drugs. And so often I've worked in that space where my church reached out, to drug addicts, gangsters, and prostitutes. So I often found myself in that space. Then I would share with a young girl and say, can I just share, my short testimony or just something with you? And then I would share it, but that's when it ended. And then we
Mm,
would kind of go back to her. And I think that switch is so important for spiritual leaders or Christian counselors to make. That switch is important. Once you've shared your testimony, if you shared your story, you need to go back to that person's experience, because otherwise you make this whole conversation about you when it wasn't about you to start with. So I think it's important for them just to be aware that once
mm,
you've shared your testimony, or once you shared your story, to come back to the person and their situation that they are going through.
yeah, that's true. Okay, then two more questions. The one is, why is it running away now? Oh, how do I merge being a Christian, believing in God, obviously believing that greater is He that is within me than He who is in the world, and knowing that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, but also mental health is a thing, mental illness rather is a thing. People struggle mentally. How do we merge the two where, yes, I have faith and I pray things and I know that God is going to help me, but there's also, I need to take a stand, I need to reach out for help. How do I blend the two?
Definitely. I think, I want like us to understand that when you have anybody who has an active brain, has mental health,
Mm,
because you have to take care of your brain. Just like everybody that has a body, as a physical body, has physical fitness. So when you think of mental health, if you have an active brain, you are working, you need to take care of your mental health. Now, with example, when it comes to integrating like biblical principles into counseling, it's important that you can use counseling as a form to psychoeducate yourself about the condition. For example, if you're a Christian, you are suffering from depression, for
mm,
example, you have
mm,
depression, you're a Christian. It doesn't make you less of a Christian, because just because you have, operation in your leg, it doesn't make your leg less of a leg. You still have a leg. You just have an injury in your leg. Now, with regards to depression, it's the same thing. Sometimes we want to minimize that experience and say, no, don't use medication because you don't trust in the Lord, and I think it's just that mind shift. When we start shifting our mind and looking at mental health like we would look at our physical health, because it does have the exact same implications on us as a human being.
mm,
And so I think it's making that shift and using the space of counseling to educate ourselves. What is depression? How
mm,
does it affect you? What happens in your body, in your mind, what happens when it comes to depression? Then you can use your spiritual principles and you can use your prayer, and you can pray directly into that sphere.
mm.
You can pray for the way that you respond to things. You can pray, you for what you are facing. You can pray for your challenges. You can go there because you understand what you are praying for. And so counseling is like the tools and prayer is the weapon. So if
Oh,
we look at it like that, like using the counseling tools, but we use prayer as a weapon, we will understand that prayer and counseling can be used together, but
mm,
it's just how we do it. We can't say that we can't. If you're a Christian, you are definitely going to pray because that's what the Bible says, and that's how you communicate with God. And I think sometimes we think prayer is this supernatural thing and we need to have this particular vocabulary. We don't. Prayer is you communicating with God. So you are communicating to God about what you are going through. You are using counseling to understand the condition.
mm,
And then you take that understanding and you take the communication and you combine it and you start communicating to God and you ask of God and you apply the scripture. And that's how the two can work together.
I love that. And I guess it goes back to faith. What is the scripture? Faith without works is dead. Because you are believing
Yes.
and you're believing and you're believing and you're believing and you're believing, but you're not educating yourself, you're not taking the steps that you need to take, and you're just sitting there waiting for God to do his miraculous work. But yes, obviously he's going to do it, but we also have a part to play.
No,
I'm glad. I'm so glad
definitely.
you put it so nicely. Thank you.
We definitely need to do that, because again, like I just want to share this, we won't stand by an operating table and tell a surgeon, just just don't do anything.
Mm,
Let's just pray that the wound is we're not going to do that. But yet, when it comes to mental health, we want to take that stance. And I think it's unfair to somebody who's going through a mental health challenge or suffering from depression or anxiety to expect them to cope with something that they don't understand.
mm. Sure, that's so
So
powerful.
that's the other thing. So it does, it can definitely work together. We can't also minimize the power of prayer, but I
Yes.
think it's important for us to understand when and how. Like again, prayer is not something you push to the side. You're constantly praying because that's how you communicate with
Mm,
God. It should be a natural thing. And so with counseling, again, it's just understanding how to
mm.
pray, where to pray.
Ah, thank you. Okay, lastly, in short, because this is a topic on its own, but I liked how we ended our conversation in the morning where we spoke about premarital counseling. And I mentioned how I think it's interesting that when it comes to marriage, we do premarital counseling. We get prepared. I didn't say this though, but I think it's interesting how we don't get prepared for life. There's no pre-life counseling where I'm prepared for all these things that might happen to me in my life, where there's losing loved ones, there's whatever other things, work, being a parent, and all these other things. Yet there's something called premarital counseling. Why is it that now when we are now getting married, we now must get counseling prepare us, but no one prepared us for life?
I think, like, when you get into, because you're going into a relationship, and I think it's also this notion of people still learning that one of the most important relationships is the relationship you have with yourself.
Yeah.
And I find that a lot of people don't understand that fundamental, that the relationship that you ultimately have with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship that you have. And I think as a country, as a people, we are progressing, and we are slowly but surely seeing how important the relationship is with ourselves. That kind of sets us up for that premarital or pre-relationship or even in life. And I think with premarital counseling, why we tend to go, or the reason, let me share the reason why I went, is because I wanted to make sure that, we, once we step into that space, we understand what's expected of us, we understand our values, we're on the same page, even though we have numerous conversations about it. But just being in that space and making sure that we are not oblivious to anything that might have come up, and then we just want to push it aside. So I
Mm,
think also just it was a step that we also took in faith to say that we don't want to do what our parents did. We want to do it a bit different in that sense, because they didn't know back then about premarital counseling.
mm,
There wasn't any emphasis on that. And now that we have the tools, why not use it? But I think most people go for preparation and to understand the other person's values. And I think that most times when people differ in the sense of come from different backgrounds as well,
mm,
I think that also plays a huge role. When you come from two different backgrounds, maybe having the one has two sets of parents, or both parents present, and the other one doesn't have both parents, and so it does affect your childhood and the way you were raised. And so coming into that space,
mm,
it does have an effect on how you navigate the relationship, how you navigate disagreements, what you think of how you want to raise your children,
mm,
those kind of things, schooling of the children. So just like preparing, because marriage ultimately, leads into a different course of family life for certain people, or even just career choices,
mm.
and seeing how you're going to balance marriage in your career. So I think it does create a lot of space for people to explore those topics and prepare wisely.
Yeah. And I know I mentioned how I think I truly, in my heart, believe that we should even be getting pre-relationship counseling, which I
Yeah.
think would help us even decide if we will even get to marriage or if we're wasting each other's time. But obviously, it costs money. So, would we want to spend money to realize that we don't want to be together? But I would rather do that than to get to the premarital counseling part and feel like I don't know who this person is, you know?
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think, like, seeing that we are talking about, faith-based and Christianity, like I feel like more young adult ministries or like youth ministries, particularly young
Mm,
adults, should kind of incorporate, something like that and normalize these things and have situations or have platforms where we can talk about these things, because it's important that you also know how you are able to choose the right partner. When is the right time?
mm,
People often ask when is the right time,
mm,
and you can't. There's no cookie cut answer to that. Only you will know when is the right time, is when you become the right person for that
mm,
other person, and only you will know that, and that comes from that, again, that relationship with yourself, and
mm,
understanding that relationship, the way that you treat yourself, the way you show up for yourself, is so important before you enter, into that relationship. And sometimes we don't realize that, and we only see it, as you said, in that relationship. And so we go, if there is that pre-relationship counseling or pre-relationship courses or whatever,
mm,
we are able to then see, are we even compatible for a person yet? And are there things in our lives that we need to deal with, before we go, or are we going to go into this relationship mindful and aware of what's happening, and then grow and learn with a person? Healing and a relationship can also coexist.
mm. That's true. And someone told me that being in a relationship is one of the greatest mirrors that you can get, because we stay single for years and we think we're the most amazing and the most perfect beings until you get into a relationship, and 2 days into it, you're like, what the hell is this? Who am I?
Because it applies pressure. It brings out the best and the worst in us, because it applies pressure, because you now have to share things with somebody, and you kind of have to make room and make space for somebody else in your life. And it needs to be something that like consciously you are doing this. And so as things start to come up, you're able to then deal with it. And also, I think it's also a very humbling experience, because you learn so much about yourself. And I think we spoke about it this morning, is that you really learn that you also have the capacity to hurt somebody. And I think that person also learned that they have the capacity to hurt somebody. And sometimes we think we don't, because maybe we don't drink, we don't smoke, we don't party, we don't this, we don't that, and we think that we are perfect.
Mm,
But then you go into a relationship, and it's a humbling experience, because you recognize that you have a bit of an attitude. You don't like to be told. There's certain things that comes up, and then you kind of have to take a back step. And you also need to learn to apologize. And we find out that some people find it difficult to say, I am sorry. You
mm,
know, I am sorry, and then change my behavior. Some people just want to say, I'm sorry, no, change behavior. Some people just want change behavior, no, I'm sorry. So you also learn, like, how do you deal with those type of things?
mm. So interesting. Okay, this was so insightful. I can't wait to save this on YouTube and send it to everyone. I go to church with my mother, my mom's BFFs who are church members, everyone who I think provides counseling. I think it was a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much for joining
Thank
me. Is there
you.
anything that you would like to end this conversation with?
I would just like to tell, anybody that has joined or that's going to listen to this live even later on, is that don't shy away from counseling. Don't shy
Mm,
away because you're scared of what society is going to say. And also, I think, be mindful of what you can expect at the church. I think sometimes we also, if you are Christian and you're going to the church for counseling, have
mm,
an open mind. I would want to say, combine your spiritual journey with a professional. If you've gone through something traumatic, if you're going through a crisis, if you have, a mental health challenge, for example, you've been diagnosed with something,
mm,
whether it's depression or bipolar or schizophrenia or anxiety, combine the counseling with a spiritual helper, I want to say a support system from somebody at church, and
mm.
build a support plan that suits your situation.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. I hope you have an amazing evening. I'm going to add your email address, like I said, on the caption of this live. Are you taking in any new clients for counseling if there's anyone who wants to book a session with you virtually?
I am taking on new clients. I am open to new clients, and that is both um, professionally and spiritually as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Have a lovely
Thank you
evening.
so much.
And bye.
You
Thank you to
too.
everyone who joined. Bye.
Bye.